Should this domesticated human pet owner be able to have sex with that pet?
No,
Okay. And should a owner of a dog be able to have sex with a dog?
no,
Okay, good. Should the owner of a cow be able to have sex with a cow?
no.
Okay. So similar. So now let's look at the domesticated human not being a domesticated human pet. Let's say they're domesticated to be raised, given this good life, and then killed for food. Can you have sex with it after you kill it? Let's say me and you and a group of people, we're going off to the we're going off. I just forgot what it's called. We go into the rainforest, and we find this tribe of people that nobody knew about, and there's like, let's say, 1,000 people, and they all have inbred so much that they become unable to rationalize and really to reason well at all. We can't teach them any language. They can't communicate with us in any way. But they're humans in every aspect. Like, they are humans. They are of the human species. But they've just inbred so much that now they're just this wild, crazy. It's essentially like a tribe of 1,000 chimps, except they happen to actually be human. But they're just anyways. And so we decide, like, okay. We're gonna bring them back with us, and we're gonna make them our kind of like human versions of pets. If you want one as a pet, or you could have it as a human version of something to raise for food. If you have room in your house, if you have a certain room, you can put it in there, slide food under the door, do whatever you do. Um, Now, are there any, if this was really happening, are there any levels of humane treatment or good raising of these humans that you think would make it acceptable for us to do this?
No, but the one thing that's different in that scenario is that would be more like taking wild animals out of their already, established, because the thing is, because I understand what you're saying, but I mean, I don't go in with the species bias. So, for example, I mean, one of the reasons
Okay.
why I think animals have a right to rights is because I don't think that being human gives us some kind of speciality. But when we're dealing with animals, or when we're dealing with people below a certain cognitive understanding, then we do kind of assume a right to make decisions for them, because we say, well, they can't make these decisions themselves. Now,
Yeah.
but the problem is like the reason why the example you just given doesn't work as a correlation to like the farming example is because in that scenario, that's taking, like, that would be like the equivalent to taking wild animals, which I don't think we have a right to do.
Okay.
So I don't think like we have a right to kidnap the tribe of people, but I also don't think we would have a right to kidnap a tribe of apes and put
Gotcha.
them in a
Okay.
zoo or
So that
whatever, because
so
they've already got their natural life.
Okay, so the wild animals that we turned into domesticated animals, you think that, well, I guess you probably don't think that was wrong to have done in the first place, because depending on the situation, if it was for survival, maybe it wasn't wrong in the first place. But the act of it itself, like right now, if we had chickens and cows, let's say we had chickens and pigs, but we didn't have cows, and to get cows, I don't know what cows were bred down from, but I don't know. Imagine we had to go find wild buffalo or wild what's a water buffalo, yeah, and you had to bring them and then figure out a way to domesticate them and eventually form them into what we have as cows or whatever. You're saying this act would be bad. We currently, because of the abundance we have, we shouldn't go and get a wild animal to create the next domesticated animal, because we don't even have to imagine no cows. So we have cows, pigs, and chickens, but we could essentially maybe go and get another wild animal and make another thing that is what people think of as one of their meat options. But you're saying, let's not do this because right now this action would be immoral. But when the ones are already domesticated, it doesn't matter. The reason I find the problem with this is because I tried to create a scenario where these wild ones essentially are like they are domesticated. So we can even imagine. So the only difference is location. So it would be almost as if somebody stole somebody's cows and they took them into the rainforest and left them there. And eventually some wild animals are just going to kill them because dumb domesticated farm animals that have no instincts for survival, probably, and so they'll get killed off. But let's say they don't get killed off. So let's say some farm animals from some other country, like some countries eat goats and some don't. So let's say the country that eats goats takes their domesticated goats to the rainforest and drops them off, and then me and you in a group are going and we go, oh, we found these. Somehow we know that they are domesticated, but they're in the wild, and we can bring them back. Let's say I lived in England with you, and or in the UK with you, and let's say that there are no goats in the UK. Would it be immoral for us to bring these goats to the UK and to start breeding them, and then now there are more goats and the population of the UK eats them?
The part that made that hard to answer was the fact that they are already domesticated goats that someone just dropped off in the wild, as opposed to wild goats that we're taking. So I've got to admit, I don't have a firm black and white answer to that in my head.
Okay,
ready
that's fine.
to fire off.
Well, my follow-up question, no matter how you answered that, was going to be, let's figure out what the difference between the domesticated ones and, let's say, the wild humans are. Now, I know the difference between like a wild lion and a domesticated cow. There's various different things, but there are reasons why some people, like very few people, but some people can have like a pet monkey or something. And but I don't know what you have to do to get this license. I don't know. But anyways, and I think it's because the capability of it being a pet. People have pet parrots, but they don't have pet parrots because we've domesticated them, I don't think. I think they have pet parrots because out of all the animals in the wild, there are certain ones that we can make be friendly, and ones we can't. And so I guess separate from our current laws, we would just have to figure out what is the trait, I guess. But if we went out to an animal that was like a ruminant type animal, like a cow or a deer or whatever, like deer, the reason why it's probably not best to have deer, is it because they run fast? I don't know. Like I don't know why deer currently aren't in areas like cows are. I don't know if there's a reason why people don't farm deer the way they farm cows. But what if you removed any trait for why you don't? It can't. I don't think it can be because it's in the wild. It could be because you think that if it can survive in the wild, if it's natural to the wild, then it probably has an interest in attempting to live its own life there, where a domesticated animal wouldn't have that interest. And that's the only thing I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, well, I suppose from my point of view, it would be that it would be very difficult to make the case for implicit consent from kidnapping a wild animal from its habitat that it's, already living its life in, and taking it into captivity. Now, like, for example, with people that have, say, exotic pets, like if you had, like, say someone had like a pet monkey and it had a pretty decent life, and you say, well, is that right or wrong? I'd be like, well, where did he get the monkey from? If you rescued it from, say, some lab or something, then he's rescued it from a much worse life. And that monkey may not really be able to survive in the wild now because it's, already, been brought up into a different world or whatever. So, continued domestication, but with someone that actually loves it and will be a guardian for it rather than an abuser, then you can make the argument for implicit consent. But taking that same monkey from its natural environment, stealing it from the wild, that's more like an abduction or a kidnapping. And then all of a sudden you can't really make the argument for implicit consent. I mean, the thing with like the deer versus the cow thing, a deer is a wild animal. So again, it's much harder to make the implicit contract argument that, oh, well, this deer would be much happier, on my farm than it would be out in the wild. It's like, well, there's nothing you can offer it that it's not getting from its natural world, and you're taking it from its life that it's already got. But in the case of the cows, these aren't wild animals. These are animals that are bred by us. They wouldn't really survive in the wild, or probably not. So like those are the things that are different for me. So like if we come from it, because I agree with you about animal, we shouldn't own sentient beings, and that, you know, that
Hmm.
goes down the line with the animals. But it's for me like what we call our animal. Like for example, my dog in society, my dog is considered my dog, and there is an ownership implied there.
Hmm.
But in my mind, I am the guardian of my dog, like I am the
Hmm.
guardian of my child. And I don't own my dog like property. I have a duty of care, because which I've voluntarily chosen to take upon myself, to invite this dog into my home, adopt it, and be a guardian. But that dog still has rights as far as I'm concerned. And this goes with all of these animals. Now,
Hmm.
even this would even happen with the farming thing. So, you know, if you're doing farming, let's, you know, say for argument's sake that there is a standard of farming that would meet standard for implicit contract, then we're still treating this animal as a sentient being. We're not claiming ownership. We're saying no, we're acting as guardians for you as part of this implicit contract, where we're getting something in return. We are going to
Hmm.
kill you at the end of it, but we're giving you a life worth living before that. We're going to kill you in a way that we consider humane, and as far as we're concerned, you're living the best life you could live, because you
Yeah.
couldn't live a life like this in the wild. But the problem is with the examples you gave of like taking, you know, the wild animal, is that's a different scenario. You can't make the argument, all the arguments that you have for implicit consent with regards to farm animals, animals that we've already created through domestication.
Hmm.
It's very difficult to make that implicit consent
Yeah.
argument with a wild animal, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree, and I think the question would come down to, is it moral to keep breeding them? So I figured out the best way to bring in my hypothetical with the humans from the rainforest. So let's say 1,000 years ago, somebody went and got the humans from the rainforest, and they were living in an area. We'll say it's in the UK, but it's in this like hidden area. They had this basically a huge piece of land that they bought and they can keep the government out of. And so for the past 1,000 years, they took this tribe from the rainforest, and now they're just inbreeding them for 1,000 years. Maybe they specifically selectively breed them to be taller and stronger, but they're the same ones I described, where they're unintelligent and they're domesticated, and they're, yeah. Anyways, and so now this gets found out, and we go, okay, we can claim that it was very immoral when it happened, but now they're here, they're domesticated, and a bunch of people in England now want to, they want their own, they want to breed them. Is this not okay anymore? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get you in a trap. I'm honestly just curious about your thoughts, and I like to be challenged too. This is not a speciesist thing, because we should be speciesist. I care more about humans than animals by far. If there's a dog and a human in a burning building, I save the human. And I've actually been challenged in a certain sense, where if I was out in nature, somebody challenged me to the point where I essentially said that somebody could be mentally challenged enough to, in nature without laws, if I witnessed a killing of a mentally challenged person, I would probably let that slide, where I wouldn't if it was a non-mentally challenged person. So I think there's plenty of room to look at things like this and to figure out why we feel how we feel. But anyways, so in this situation, how strongly would you be okay with it or stand against people that want to keep breeding these inbred humans that will keep being unintelligent and unable to be reasoned with, but they have exact human emotions that we have? They can imagine the future, they can have their memories of the past, but they cannot communicate. And in many areas, they're very dumb.
I think you could do it with implicit consent. I mean, it's a little bit of a kind of grey area. It's not something that's sort of super black and white because of the various aspects of it that you described. You know, as I say, it's like, for me, it's definitely wrong if you took them from their wild. That part's definitely wrong.
Okay.
Um, but once they've already been taken from that scenario, then again, it's a little bit like the chimp situation again. It's like, you know, you shouldn't take the chimp from the wild, but if you're rescuing that chimp from some laboratory or circus or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, then you're definitely doing right. And then it's like, okay, well, what about breeding in captivity? I think if you can meet the requirements for implicit consent, then, although it's one of those grey areas where I think reasonable people could disagree, I don't think it's a black and white thing. I don't think I couldn't step in and say, no, you're definitely causing a violation here by continuing to breed in captivity. I
Okay.
don't think that's necessary. I don't think I could say for certain that that's wrong. So I don't think I could be able to stop that. But I would be able to stop them poaching them from the wild, because that I can be more certain about, you know.
Okay.
And this is again where that reason beyond reasonable doubt comes into it when it comes to enforcing law, because you need to be certain that someone's in violation. You can't just be, if it's grey area, then you can't act, you know.
Okay, well, so let's look at different areas. Let's imagine that these humans I'm talking about, people just want to use as pets. They want to use. Some people have dogs. Some people want a human pet, and so they have them in their house. And now the alternative to this could be something, because they wouldn't be able to live on their own. It wouldn't be morally right to put them back in the wild. So what would have to happen with these humans, aside from euthanizing them, would be maybe something similar to what we currently do with extremely mentally challenged people, where they live in a home of sorts and are taken care of. So that's the alternative. But we got to decide if we are accepting of this idea of keeping these mentally challenged people as pets. So some people might have one of these pets that it's a human. They act just like humans, except you can't communicate with them. And they take them outside and run around with them. They're smiling and everything's fine. You have a good pet owner. But then you might have one that has a human and it just doesn't have time for it. It's at work, and while it's at work, it has to stay in this tiny backyard or in this tiny room, going to the bathroom in the corner, all this different stuff. This mentally challenged person is constantly trying to get out, as you might imagine, like a dog might want to get out of a certain room, and you can only do your best as a pet owner. So would you find this acceptable as being owned as a pet?
You would have to well, yes and no, and let me explain. Because I would say yes in the sense of being an equivalent to the pet relationship that I described, you know, like with my dog, but no in the sense that like how society currently views my relationship with my dog is not how I view it, and it's not how it should be. Because as I say, I'm my dog's guardian. I'm not my dog's owner. My dog is not property. It's a sentient being, and I'm the guardian of it, just the same as I'm the guardian of my child, my human child. You know,
Okay.
so it would be a similar kind of scenario in what you're talking about, because and to be honest, it's almost what you're describing is almost what we have now with mentally handicapped humans that you know that do exist. You know, is that if we accept that they don't possess the understanding to be able to look after themselves, just like children below a certain age and just like animals, then we have to adopt a responsibility on their behalf as their guardians. That doesn't make us property owners of them. That makes us their guardians. So we're not making them property. You know, we're not denying their rights as sentient beings. We're simply understanding that there's certain aspects of their self-ownership that they cannot exercise because they don't have the understanding to make the necessary choices.
Would
So they need a guardian that can do that on their behalf.
would
Does that
you
make
be?
sense?
It does. Would you be concerned if people were able to just go into a facility where there's mentally challenged people and say like, "Oh yeah, I want to adopt this one," and they they take a mentally challenged adult home and they just have complete guardianship over that one? The same in the same way you would a dog, where or do you think they should change how it is with dogs, where there should be checkups every like 6 months to make sure an owner is treating their dog well?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, like I say, when I say I think it can work similar to like the relationship between a dog or a cat or another animal, but that's not in the sense of how pet ownership works today.
Yeah.
It's how I think it should work, where it's not even ownership; it's actually guardianship, similar to how we have with our children and what have you. You know, so it's kind of like, because the thing is like, because when you said about, oh, you know, would it be ethical for them to breed? It's like that's kind of similar to the question of if you have mentally handicapped people, or if you know like people that carry the genes, like for example, there's certain genetic conditions that can be detectable in a womb or what have you, or even before, where they say, oh, well, your child's likely to have this handicap. Is it ethical to bring them into the world and all the rest of it? And then you have, but then you have the same conversation about quality of life and implicit consent. But this is my point about it. On all of this is I think it always needs to come back, because every time, if you always bring it back to self-ownership, then the questions you have to ask to make these decisions are always the same thing. Like, can I meet the burden of implicit consent to be able to act on behalf of this sentient being and make this decision before them? You know, if I'm making a decision that I know is just going to cause them torturous harm, then I'm obviously not meeting the burden of implicit consent. If I am making a decision that does, and if it's a grey area, then obviously then that comes into the aspect of, you know, who has the authority over that grey area. So for example, to take the example of the chimp that I rescued from the circus. So in that case, I've met the implicit consent because I'm providing it with a decent life. It can't go into the wild. It was raised in a circus, but I've rescued it from a worse place. So the implicit consent, you know, is clearly there. Okay, but what if that, do I let that chimp breed with another chimp that's got a similar situation, and we create this new domesticated lineage of chimpanzees that are now living domesticated? I think it's kind of a moral grey area, but it's enough of a moral grey area that I don't think anybody could say that I'm clearly violating the implicit contract. Again, as long as I'm still meeting the implicit contract with each life I bring into the world.
I personally don't find it a moral gray area, but you might be. Yeah, we might have to look at each individual life. Okay, so I got a couple questions that I know the answer to, and the main questions will be the follow-ups to it. So just bear with me. So going back real quick to the domesticated humans that we're having as pets, and we're okay. Should this domesticated human pet owner be able to have sex with that pet?
No.
Okay. And should a owner of a dog be able to have sex with a dog?
No.
Okay, good. Should the owner of a cow be able to have sex with a cow?
No.
Okay. So similar. So now let's look at the domesticated human not being a domesticated human pet. Let's say they're domesticated to be raised, given this good life, and then killed for food. Okay. So if you can raise this thing, give it a good life, and then the most humane killing it for food, you just give it a quick little shot, little poke, and then it drifts out. And we should probably start doing that to cows, actually. Okay. So you can own this thing, you can kill it. Later, you can eat it, but the eating doesn't really matter. But you can kill it.
Sorry to interrupt, but you can't own it. Remember, the implicit contract is.
You can be the guardian. You can be the guardian of it. There is a range of good life it must have, and that range does not involve unconsensual sex. But you can kill it. Can you have sex with it after you kill it?
I guess that would be a grey area.
I like that you're willing to think to this level. Most people just have their intuition jump in, but no, you're right to think about this.
Well, because I'm trying to work from the principle.
Yeah, a lot of vegans that are more philosophical, that like to break it down and think about it, discuss roadkill and how eating roadkill wouldn't violate veganism, where other people just have their intuition, which is a go-to no you don't, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with an intuition. I don't mean anything against anybody that doesn't think philosophically, but I like that you do, and I like that you're thinking about this. So yeah, can you so you have a pet human, you're very attracted to this human, you give it a great life, you execute it because you're going to eat this human's meat like you would a cow. Can you have sex with it?
I think you probably could. I mean, it's not a practice I'm obviously endorsing, but I think, yeah. I mean, because the thing is, it's an easy answer when you're talking about the sex while they're alive, because it's rape if you're having unconsensual sex, and obviously they're not able to consent. Same with children, same with your dog, same. And
you're
with your
consistent
cow.
Because even with farm animals, you don't want them treated poorly at all. So it's good, yeah.
Yeah,
It's consistent.
yeah, and the thing is also, and just to put a pin in this because I'm not trying to avoid it, but one thing of what you mentioned earlier with the species bias and that is, personally, I do reject species bias, at least with regards to the arbitrary nature of it, because